Good evening. I'm calling this meeting to order. Happy New Year. It is January 7th, and it's a new year. We're pretty excited to still all be here. I'd like to have a roll call, please.
English,
Here.
Wood,
Here.
Egan,
Yeah.
Miller,
Here.
Evans,
Here.
Gabriel.
Here.
All right. We could rise for the invocation. David Brainett from the Mountain Lakes Bible Church is here. Thank you for coming, David.
Let's pray. Father God, we do thank you for the privilege that we have to cry out to you because of the work of your Son, Jesus Christ. And as we sit here this evening and look at the agenda and look at all the events and activities that are on it, pray for wisdom for these leaders. Your word is very, very clear that we should obey and listen to those that you have put in authority over us. And we thank you for their service and their sacrifice to our community. Pray for wisdom for them as they make decisions and choices that affect our families and our children and our livelihoods. We pray for wisdom as they look at finances and the growth of our community. We pray for the infrastructure and the aquifers and all the services that we provide, both EMS, law enforcement, education, and the hospitals. And God, it's a big ordeal to try and manage it. So I pray for unity in decision making. Your word is very, very clear that all things should be done with decency and in order. And so I pray that as we go through these meetings each and every night, that we would remember that we're community members, that we live here together, and we're blessed to live here, and that when we walk away, we can shake hands, shake the dust off, and move on. And so, and God, as we present these things before you, I just pray that you be glorified and exalted. In Christ's name, I ask these things. Amen.
Thanks, David. Kenny, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Would. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Any amendments to the agenda, Council? Moving on, we have a presentation from Tom Grief, our fire chief, and Michael Keith from Zion Bank. Okay. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening.
Good evening. First and foremost, I hope you all had a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Before I jump into your staff report, I want to provide you with a recap so we're all on the same page of where the GO bond process is currently. And before I do that, I want to introduce Mr. Michael Keith. He's here with us. He's Vice President of Zion Public Finance, who is our contracted municipal advisor. He'll be contracted with this last of December to help us with the GO bond project. And I'll get more into that in just a second. As you recall, last July I came before you seeking approval to move forward with the RFP process to seek out a municipal advisory firm to help us with the general obligation bond that is slated for May of 25 if you approve that. And so during that process, we moved forward. We created an internal evaluation committee in the city that consisted of the city administrator, city attorney, finance director, deputy chief sales, and myself. And we identified and contracted with some help from both legal teams. We got a contract finished in December to move forward with Zion's Public Finance and Portman Square. And they will be our municipal advisory firm for this project. So to kick off this project, we had a couple initial meetings in December, and we talked about some broad timelines, as well as identified some critical tools to help us with the success of this bond election in May. So at this time, I'd like to just run through a few slides to get us to go back in history a little bit and talk about when our public safety obligation bond started. Our first one was in 2005, and that was a public safety bond for $7 million. And as you can see, we were successful with public support at 74%. And again, in 2015, we ran our second one. That was for $6 million at an 85% approval margin. So for the fire department, our current priorities remain the replacement of our frontline fire apparatus. This bond contains an expansion remodel of Station 2, a remodel of Station 1, and an expansion of Station 3, as well as some command vehicle replacements. I'm going to skip past this and I'll come right back. At this time, I want to take the opportunity to look at what costs were in 2015 versus today, because that will provide some insight. I know most of you probably saw the article on Saturday in the Coeur Press, and you saw a number of $16.4 million in that article. I want to reemphasize tonight, we're not here seeking your approval for that number, but we want to include that number in the community-based survey that we would like to send out. So I want to talk a little bit about costs. So in 2015, you'll see that the Type 1 pumper engine cost $585,000, and today we're looking just under $1.2 million for that same big red truck. The ladder truck in 15 was 1.4. We're looking at 2.2 to replace that right now, as well as staff vehicles. We see a significant increase also. And just to talk about the build-out time on these, if we pass a bond in May and we're successful at ordering these in July, we might see them in early 2028. And so there's a 3-year waiting period to get these apparatus built. What I don't have in this slide that I'd like to talk about too is our latest fire station that we opened back in 2017 at Handley and Atlas, Station 4. We were able to build that fire station for $1.3 million, 7,000 square foot facility, and so that came to $187 a square foot. We are looking at the cost of approximately $440 per square foot to do a remodel rebuild of Station 2. So we're looking at triple construction costs, and we're looking at double costs on apparatus. And I just wanted to provide that because I know there was a question when people saw that $16.4 million number in the paper, and that's how we got to that. And like I said tonight, I'm not seeking your approval for this number yet, but just to include it into this community-based survey that our advisory partners would like to launch next week. So what will the survey provide us? And like in my staff report, I indicated our municipal advisory partner indicated this is a critical tool in shaping our bond strategy moving forward. So it'll assess public awareness and perception for the current needs that we have. It'll also help measure the current support we have in the community for a bond right now. The tolerance for property tax impacts is important. That's probably going to be something that's weighted pretty heavy with folks, as well as identify areas where we need to refocus or provide more information when we meet with community groups. And then ultimately, it'll demonstrate our commitment that we're community-driven decision-making with moving forward with this bond. That's the ultimate decision tonight, is we want to gauge the temperature and provide feedback from the community before we come to you in March with a formal resolution for a solid number. So our decision point and recommendation for my staff report is that council should approve the fire department proceed with the community-based survey, and the funding would come from our debt service fund, which is where we also have our contracted amount with Zion of Finance and Portland Square. And I stand for questions. Mike is also here for questions.
Questions, council? Kiki.
Chief, I just have one. In your RFQ and your selection of this advisory firm, how long have they been doing this sort of work? Maybe they could speak to that.
Question.
Good evening, Mayor, Evers, and Councilwoman Miller. I've actually, in the public finance arena, and I've been doing it for 20 years. As a public finance firm, we not only cover Idaho, we cover Utah, we cover other boroughs, but we have done help cities, school districts, you name it, pass bonds, water, sewer, this is something that we do, and we're kind of unique part of the bank, particularly because that is what we focus on is public finance committees and capital financing. And we brought in Portman Square to expand that capability because how we communicate now is different, right? Thank you, everybody knows that. I've been doing this for 2 decades, and I was actually part of that first bond that you guys did in 2005. And when we communicated with that bond, right, we had the newspaper, we had the radio, and we had maybe some community letters. And that's what it took, right? That's what it took to communicate with our patrons to get something passed. And as we've seen that shift, as we've seen how people get information, it's become much more complicated, right, to reach all different levels of the community. So Portman Square provides that expertise in how to manage, social media and other avenues of, and they've been doing that for a long time. Amy Holly, who I'm working with there, she has some experience, I think close to 2 decades, working with a lot of expert and focused as an agriculturist.
Great. So then Portman Square is kind of the backup piece, and you feel confident for this price with Portman, you're going to be able to get a good enough baseline from the community in order to get what you need for this bond?
Absolutely. And, although the Ada County bond didn't pass, they got that thing to 65.4% through this process in a very short window.
Right.
In which they accomplished that. And if you think about jail facilities, right, how much people understand about jail facilities and the need and kind of misconceptions about that, they were able to understand the community, what their needs, what the misunderstandings are. That's part of the challenge, right? Is as we look to see what we do and what the chief does, like his job is to make sure that we have fire service, right? But the public doesn't always understand that. And for instance, one of the things that I think I've even learned through the last decade, and a lot of community members don't understand, is that EMS services is some of the biggest services provided by fire departments today. And most people in the communities don't understand that, right? Don't understand that need to manage what's happening. And so really, part of this process is to do very much what Portman Square did with Ada County is describe the need, make sure that people visual representations of what we're trying to accomplish, understanding some of these nuances of trucks and cost and comparison. And so really the survey is kind of 2 pieces, right? It's we're gathering information, but we're also sending information, right? We're providing technical questions. And the way that Portman Square kind of crafts these questions is to also educate the community at the same time, so that they understand some of these costs and needs, and then that feedback.
Okay, great. Well, this is a big change for the community. We have a lot of new people, so I just want to, and I've been doing a lot of surveys in the last 4 years, and so I was looking at this number going, are we going to get where we need to be with a real dramatic number being floated around out there? So I'm just hoping we've covered all the bases and we're good to go with that. So thank you.
Yeah, no, and I look forward to being able to present the results to
Appreciate it.
Mr. Kukin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, hi, Michael. You say here in the staff report that you'll be sending out the survey to approximately, and then you list an exact number, 15,565 registered city voters. That seems very peculiar. How did you come up with that number?
So that's a number that Portman Square helped us come up with. And so they've gone in and they've researched the community information and kind of looked at, where are those opportunities, for support, what is kind of the outreach, not only of the city, the city partners, and get that survey out across the community.
So you don't know how that exact number was chosen?
No, not from Portman Square. But I know that
It just seems really odd because the population here is what, 55 15,000, and I don't know exactly how many registered voters there are, and I assume that probably is just the exact number of registered voters. But as someone who just ran a campaign last year, and knowing how many voters there are, and it says $1,700, well, $1,712 to contact 15,000 registered city voters, how are you going to be spending that?
So in terms of how we're going to reach them,
Yeah, because if I was running a political campaign, that would probably cost me about $18,000.
yeah, so the thing to understand about
A buck a
these
piece,
contracts
yeah.
is there's two parts to it, right? So the piece that we provided the council, right, was the work that we're going to do, crafting the messaging and everything that's going to go out, right? There's additional expenses, right, depending on how we deploy the surveys, right? And so when you think about, posters and QR codes as being an option, when you think about the text messaging is going to go out, there's costs for that. Like, there's additional costs, and that was part of that, and that few thing that was said that any additional costs for those expenses would be in addition to the work and research that we're doing and advice we're providing to develop the messaging, right? So we're going to craft the messages for the text for that feed, right? We're going to craft the messaging that can go to the newspapers and community partners. And so all of that is going into that number. And then the deployment piece of that is an additional expense that we would be taking to both the chief and the council for that.
Well, so the maximum number that we're allocating tonight is $3,500. And in the staff report, it said the cost identified for the survey is approximately $1,712, which will cover the cost of sending the survey to approximately 15,000 registered city voters. So I just really wanted to know how they were being contacted. And obviously, if you're in surveys and research and polling, you know that how you contact someone is important. I mean, if you're going to want the maximum return and a reliable number, you can't go by phones anymore because people have cell phones. And doing it direct mail, of course, is going to be the most expensive, but probably the most reliable. And I don't know if you're going to be putting people out in front of Safeway to get their opinion, but that was just kind of where I was after, because the validity of the data depends on, your sample size and how valid that size is. So that was what I was driving at.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question, Councilman. And so it's a bit of a multi-pronged, right? And so as you have already identified, we have multi-generations of folks in terms of how they receive this information, right? And so there are still folks that like metal, right? That and we've seen that in campaigns, right? People still send out campaigns because it's effective, right? In terms of doing something flashy in the mail that tells us about what's happening with the bond. But we're not going to rely on that solely, right? So we're going to look for community partners pushing out the survey, text messaging, right? So we're not just going to rely on city council. We're going to rely on chambers of commerce, local companies. We're going to identify partners, right? They want to help kind of the fire department out in the city and say, like, look, you're a major employer. Would you support us and help us, right, get this survey out so that we can understand, what people want and try to even get beyond, the registered voters, because, even though we've identified those registered voters, people talk, right? People have influence, in the community. And so we've also talked about, the potential for posters, right? QR codes. People standing in lines in certain places be able to snap the QR code and do the survey, right? And so trying to figure out in this world to leverage social media, trying to leverage some of the things we've done in the past with newspapers and mailers are all going to be part of it.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing, we're going to see the data, obviously, and maybe even come back and tell us more information, but that's all going to be listed in the report. I assume it's going to thoroughly document all the sources and how everything was arrived at.
And Amy Hawley will be here with me too to present that.
Perfect.
To you guys.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
Mr. English.
Oh, go ahead. I'll wait.
Okay, well, question on the, I know that there's different parameters on, bonds and levies and how long and all of this. Is this or is this still a future decision point if we're going for the hardest of hard, the supermajority, or is it a 60% level? That's one question. And then maybe for you or the chief, with, if we were able to get all of this stuff, that seems like it's almost every vehicle that's in the fire department fleet, or is that accurate?
No, it's not every vehicle.
Okay,
No, there are some vehicles that just don't have the mileage
okay.
it warrants us to replace. Our frontline vehicles, though, as I spoke about back in July, and there's a guideline for a fire engine, 10 to 12 years. But we are in such a high volume system here that we tend to run the wheels off of them, and then we expect them to go into a backup role for another 5 years. And that's where we're hurting right now.
Okay.
Because our backup rigs, we're having to decommission because they're 2003 engines that we've rebuilt, we've done wiring harnesses, and they're not reliable. So there's an extra pumper in here to help us, because the rule of thumb is to have one reliable backup engine for every 5 pumpers that you have, and
Yeah.
have one backup aerial for every frontline aerial. So that's where our future planning lies in this.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner English, you had asked a question about kind of the bond details.
Yeah.
Piece of that. And we're not at that point yet, as the chief has kind of pointed out, we're not asking for a specific amount. We're not going to settle
Okay.
on that, right, until we can have that community feedback. And then, once we have that feedback, we can kind of come back to you guys and talk about that. Traditionally, the city has done payment bonds. For
Yeah.
these type of things.
Yeah.
It is a supermajority, right? Going through this effort, right, to understand kind of our community and what the pain points are. We know that inflation has happened. The school district has passed, a supplemental levy for $25 million, right? And so we want to make sure that, people understand, kind of the needs and where they're at and their ability to support that. And then we can kind of come back to you guys with a recommendation following, kind of the survey results. And then if, we're marching towards the May election, that decision where we kind of finalize the amounts, right, the tax impact, and how long it's going to be, that would all happen in March. And you can pass an election resolution at a public meeting.
Okay, which isn't all that long from now, and that's, out of all of this, from having done this a lot of times, is the most important thing that you need to have is how much for that, now the average, 400,000 or 500,000, whatever that, how much per month for the typical Coeur d'Alene taxpayer is it going to add? There probably isn't any more important piece of information, so anyway.
Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, we know the GO bond has been critical for the city of Coeur d'Alene to deliver fire services to the community. How detailed will the survey be? Dan brought up a good point. People want to really know what's the bottom line on my taxes. So how detailed will it be and how lengthy?
So, Councilman Woods, we balance that, right? Like, if it's too long, people aren't going to take it, right? And so we try to get some very specific questions, typically in the 10 to 14 question range. And it covers things like, would you support, replacement of fire trucks at an estimated cost, right? I think of $10 million. Would you support, $6.4 million for either, a remodel, right, or rebuild, of a station? Would you support it, right, if you knew that it cost you approximately $17, per 100,000, in taxes, right? And so that information is absolutely critical, and part of the reason why we're coming to you today to float the number, but not have you guys settle on a number, is so that we can communicate those costs out, to the paper. And so the survey will dive into that. It will also dive into, some of the nuances, right, of what they understand about, the services that are being provided, right? And do they understand, the need and the growth that's kind of, happening? And there's even an open-ended question of, what did we miss, right, on this? And so, we've been doing this for a long time. We're going to have really well-crafted, questions to really get at those nuances of how are people feeling, right? How are people feeling about, fire services? How are they feeling about costs? How are they feeling about expenses in general? Right? We all know that cost of eggs are going through the roof, right? That you've got all these other pressure points, right, in the community beyond just our ask. And so it's a balance act, right, of trying to really get to the detail and provide you guys with some good information about your community, but not so large that we don't have a good representation of sample size. It's what we take, right? Because we know that we have short attention spans now. So it takes much more than 3 to 5 minutes to kind of go through the survey.
Thank you.
Questions? Amy?
Chief, I see if this is approved tonight to move forward, you're going to launch the survey on January 13th. How long do you expect the survey to take?
Right. So, Councilwoman Athens, members, so we plan to run it for 3 weeks. And through all those kind of those hours.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Kenny?
Michael cited were actually the exact ones going out in the survey, so the 10 million, the 6.4, and the 17 per 100,000.
Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not really to get into the numbers, because I know we're going to see those later, but it's a big number. It's a real number, and the biggest number is going to be that station. And I just want to give the council very, very briefly, I remember, I'm dating myself unfortunately, but I worked the first shift that station was open, and it was built because the Oxark, where Oxark is now, that was the station. It got shut down because methane gas was coming up through the vents. So we had to change it, move it. It was built on the smallest parcel of land for the least amount of money, as quick as it could for 2 people. Because that's all that was out there, and back in the day, that was called station vacation out there. Because there weren't very many calls. Now it's the center of the universe, but back then it was very, very slow, and the last bond, we decided to remodel that station, and there's only so much you can do with the smallest, cheapest building you can build. And even though it's a big number, when it comes time, I would really like the council to consider maybe the rebuild versus the remodel, and we can speak more about that later.
Station vacation.
That was out in the Tules in those days,
There was
huh?
nothing else north, that's
When-
all it was.
When
End
was
of the
that?
country.
A long time ago.
Long time ago.
Date himself.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I would like to have
Mr. Mayor, I will
somebody-
move to approve the Fire Department Municipal Advisory Firm Partners to launch a community-based survey and utilize the city's debt service fund for up to $3,500.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion.
I was just going to say one thing, and that's, people like to complain that they pay, this is too expensive, it costs too much money. Oh my God, what are we paying for this? Until you guys show up. So, there we go.
Then it's worth it.
Yeah, and then it's absolutely worth it.
Anybody else comments? Hearing none. But, roll call.
Sorry, have that down the other way. Okay.
But all in favor.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Dugan,
Yep.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Thank you. Next up is public comments. I have a list here of some folks that want to speak, and if you are interested and you're not on the list, maybe you could write it down and go see Troy. They'll put you on the special list. So first up is Neil Schreiber from Kootenai County. Welcome, Neil. Happy New Year.
Mr. Mayor, I'm Dwayne Halliday. Neil and I are going to switch rotations, if that's okay with you.
Oh, sorry. You look just like Neil. You're Dwayne.
Yes, I'm
All
Dwayne.
right. Welcome from Green Acres, Washington. Thanks for driving all that way.
Well, thanks for having me, Mr. Mayor and council members. I appreciate it. My name is Dwayne Halliday. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of Lamar Outdoor Advertising. I am a born and raised Coeur d'Alene Viking, graduated from Boise State University, and I'm third generation Coeur d'Alene. Actually, my grandfather was a 3-term county commissioner here, so I wanted to come tonight to give you a little bit of background about Lamar, what we do, and how we integrate ourselves into a community. Lamar is a large nationwide company, but basically we are self-serving entities in our own community. We operate, everybody that works is part of the community. All the decisions are made here. And it's very important for us to be part of a community. And we are in Spokane, northern Idaho, and we run all the way, my office runs all the way up to about the Cascades. We operate about 1,200 faces here, and we have been wanting to upgrade and do some things in Coeur d'Alene, where there is a great need for billboard advertising. We don't have enough here to supply the demand. So therefore, we would like to convert some of our things to digital advertising, which we have done, and we've gone through a little bit of this. Year to date, when we closed out this year, 89% of the business that we did was local business. That means mom and pop shops. That means some local retail. People that are employing people here and spending dollars here are the people who we are advertising for on our structures. And very little of it is national and regional advertising. It's just, that isn't what we get a call for in our smaller areas. We have large offices across the United States that have that call. We're not that way here. So I just would like you guys to see a face to say, this person isn't just Lamar, clear out here. I'm local. I live in Green Acres. I was born and raised here. I'm proud to have won a state championship for Coeur d'Alene football here. That still means a lot to me. And I know I'm 56 years old, but that still means a lot to me. So it's very, very meaningful to me. I'm passionate about my business. I'm passionate about this town. And I would just like you guys to consider this on the agenda, to let us tell our tale and be able to work together to be able to relocate and do a little bit of this stuff that the businesses are calling for. If the businesses weren't calling for it, I wouldn't be here asking you for it. So with that, that's really all I wanted to take up your time tonight with, and to see my face and say, this is Lamar. We're local.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So Neil, you're up next. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing us to come and visit with you guys. There was one other thing I'd like to tag on with Dwayne, is the amount of nonprofits and other things that we do for the community. We are already on Amber Alerts. If there's anything like that, we do that as well. After your last meeting, I found out about the Kootenai County Emergency Management Program. We've been in contact with them to get all our digitals on with them. So if there's anything that comes up like that, we're on board with it. Those are the other things that we do within the community in addition to helping businesses. I just wanted to go over a couple of things as far as the relocation, and there was basically two issues regarding not approving the permit. One was with the height restriction, and the staff had I had notes here. I think it was in section C4.8 that restricts the height to stay at the same as the sign that's being taken down. What wasn't mentioned was that in section C3I6, it allows that if the building blocks the sign or the sign blocks the building, that we can go 12 feet over the top of the building and with a maximum of 48 feet. That's what we were looking at, is to The property we're at, we were just asking to go up to 37 feet, which would be just about 12 feet higher than the building. The building's 25 feet tall. So that kind of fits the parameters. I don't think that's a variation because it meets the code that's currently there. The other issue was being within 500 feet of a residential area. There's a couple residential areas that are closer than 500 feet. That's one of the reasons why we proposed a V-type structure where we're actually turning the sign so it's going away from the residential area. Maybe I'll back up a little bit. It's our understanding, it's just that you didn't want the visibility to the residential areas. So that's why we're V-ing that structure, so it's kind of going away from the residential areas, and it's going towards the commercial area, which is what we're in. And in addition to that, there's a building to the south of the property we're on that's over 40 feet tall, so that would block one of those residential areas from even seeing the board because it's taller than what the billboard is. So they're not going to see it anyway. And those residential areas also have trees and shrubs and everything that go around their developments in these apartment buildings. My time is up. So they can't see it anyway. So there was other things, but I'll
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Suzanne Knutson. Welcome, Suzanne. Happy New Year.
Why the press guy comes for about 10 minutes and then he's gone.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Suzanne Knutson, and I live in Coeur d'Alene. World Braille Day was on January 4th, 2025, and our community can become more accessible to people who are blind through Braille by incorporating Braille signage on public buildings, transportation stops, sidewalks, offering Braille versions of important documents and information, and actively promoting Braille literacy within the community through education and awareness initiatives. I'd like to encourage you as our community leaders and ask for your help to encourage our community to adopt accessibility practices and help raise awareness about the importance of Braille accessibility. And here are a few items that I'd like you to consider. Just maybe you'll find one or two that you want to focus on, and then we can go from there. Add Braille to public signs, including street names, building entrances, elevator buttons, restroom labels in public buildings, key points of interest, and important directions. Maybe the moose, putting some on our public art or things like that. Ensure that Braille signage is formatted correctly according to established standards. Use high contrast colors alongside Braille for better visibility for people with low vision. Position Braille signs at a comfortable height and ensure that Braille dots are large enough to read easily. Perhaps we could ask our art commission to help with some of those things. Use tactile markers alongside Braille for additional guidance. Include Braille on bus stop signs and information boards. Provide Braille instructions on public transportation vehicles. Include Braille on park signages, including trail maps and information about amenities. Encourage businesses, churches, medical offices to provide information in Braille. And we could also work on websites and apps. Over 70% of websites are not accessible to people with disabilities. Offer Braille versions of important documents like receipts, forms, product labels. Train staff on interacting with customers who use Braille. Partner with local organizations such as the Idaho Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired to support the visually impaired to conduct Braille literacy workshops. I read in the paper that several of you think that tourism is a key in our community and you want visitors to keep coming back. And if we make our community more accessible to our citizens who call Coeur d'Alene home, then word will get out. They'll invite their friends, and it'll spread. Social media has a way of doing that. Travelers with disabilities in the United States spend around $50 billion annually on travel. Travelers with disabilities in the United States spend around $50 billion annually on travel. When including the spending of their companions, the total economic contribution is estimated to be over $100 billion per year. If Coeur d'Alene's accessible, they will spend some of that money here. please try and think of just a few ways, and let me know if I can help. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask one question? Suzanne, thank you. This is always all good information, and it would be great if we could do all of it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But is there anything that comes through your organization or resources that you can prioritize the list of, say, the top few things that a person who was sight impaired would say, these top few things would help because they're the most common? I mean, like elevators, almost, they all have that. But is there another resource that you could say, these next 3 level items would really help the sight impaired in Coeur d'Alene?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what partnering with local organizations like the Idaho Commission, they have an office here in Coeur d'Alene. We could probably invite somebody here to come talk about those things.
And just take a look at a priority list for that, and
Yeah.
then maybe we can talk about how maybe later we can partner with doing some of those things through
For sure.
grants or
Yeah,
whatever.
National Braille Day is February 21st, so maybe somebody from the Idaho Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired would want to come and talk about that. I can contact them if you'd like me to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Suzanne. Moving on, announcements, City Council. Mr. Gookin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't have an announcement, but I do have an email here from a citizen who wasn't able to make it for public comment. She wanted me to read her message, which is regarding fireworks. And
Oh, yeah,
if you've
yep,
been,
yep.
if you were awakened on the 1st or late on the 31st, you probably were aware of the fireworks. And we did see a few letters to the editor, so I will read this from Mrs. Thompson. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for serving our community. I hope that the reason you serve is first to serve our community and keeping it overall safe. I understand that you also set policies and serve as the legislature of local government. I know you have other responsibilities as well. You are elected officials, and in fact, I voted for a few of you in the past, and I'm aware of the sole burden of the safety lies on the shoulders of our police force. I'm writing to express my deep concern over the illegal fireworks in our city. These fireworks are against the law. They disturb the peace and hurt our pets, not to mention our vets with PTSD or other people with PTSD. I'm asking you to please do something. I would think the undercover police could patrol the area, stiffer fines could be given, or billboards could be coming into town to notify people to stop it. I understand that some people like it, others don't care, and even others participate in it. Still, it's against the law. All it takes for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. I would not want to live in a place where there is lawlessness abounding, where peace is disturbed. I worked with a detective a couple of years ago, and I'm willing to do that again, even though me being alone and a widow could end up causing my property harm or me harm. I literally had a neighbor friend come to my door on New Year's Eve with a Roman candle in his hand telling me, oh, we just want to celebrate. So then maybe we need to just tell people that they can go out in the streets and shoot off their guns to celebrate. I had a mortar land on my back deck 2 years ago. It was half full of powder. I took it down to the mayor's office with a letter. In closing, I've lived here in town since 2014, and I've lived in Idaho since 1995. I'm a widow of a Green Beret. My parents and my brother were vets. I'm a patriot, though, through and through. I love to have fun, and I love Coeur d'Alene. I serve this community also. My husband and I had a jail outreach ministry in Spirit Lake for 10 years. I've also served at Kootenai County Jail for 4 years. I'm asking you all to please do what you can to stop this nonsense before something bad happens. And I must say I agree. So what are we going to do?
Christie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually had some comments from citizens as well. That was one of the topics. I have another one after this. But the fireworks complaint, I think we were all just, you get lax by the time New Year's comes around. And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you woke up and go, oh, no, it's New Year's. And it was really ridiculous. But I wondered if we could explore, and of course, this would be at council direction if we wanted to do this, if we could explore maybe a designated area in the city for families to bring their children to light off the legal fireworks twice a year, 4th of July and New Year's, and maybe, just maybe, that would curb some of it in the neighborhood, if even maybe some fun organizations could make it more of a celebration with different things happening. I don't know where that would be. I would rely on staff to give us some feedback on that, but I don't know what council feels. Voluntary, not forceful, but maybe a designated area for people to celebrate. Any thoughts, council?
Should we make this an agenda item to talk about on
Yes.
at a
Thank
later
you.
date?
And along those lines, another thing I'd like to make an agenda item to talk about at a later date, I continually get comments, and I see with my own eyes, the turkeys that are driving everybody crazy. But I just got a very heartfelt email from a longtime citizen. Turkeys that have moved into the suburban areas, they don't have any natural predators. If they're out in the county, I mean, they do what they do. They live or they die. But here, over on Pine Hill area, Coeur d'Alene Golf Course, right downtown here.
My counseling office.
Yeah.
Some of my best friends are turkeys. Well, that didn't come out
And
right.
so they're just messy, cute but messy, and so people are really sick of it. And I want to bring it back as an agenda for review. Have staff look into options. I know the city of Spokane actually deployed resources to go out and gather the eggs. How well that was done, I don't know. But I think it was the city administrator had to do it. I'm just kidding. But they gathered the eggs, and that cut down on the numbers, or some way to safely trap them, something safe and humane. But I think we do need to consider addressing it. So I'd like it to come back. How does everyone feel about staff looking at that?
And as a quick follow-up to that, actually, it sounds crazy, but, right down 11th and Mullen is actually more, some people are more worried about being overrun with rabbits than the turkeys. So, I mean, we should look at the whole urban zoo thing, so, yeah.
Relocation.
I think we could combine both issues, fireworks, turkeys, and rabbits.
And introduce
Come
the
up with a
owls.
solution.
Okay.
Mull that around.
Solution.
Feels like New
Put 'em all
Year's
in a bag
around here,
together.
yeah? All right, I'll look into that, get it on the agenda, let
Thank
them
you.
spend some
Cats,
time on it.
Thank you.
Anything else, please?
I just wanted to share with council that I attended a meeting last month with Senator Taves, and it was regarding, everybody together, housing. And I was really pleased with his willing to listen. There was 3 different jurisdictions that had planning directors there, some city council members, some development people, and some other housing interested partners, and put forward a lot of great conversation and some potential solutions that may or may not come forward this legislative session, but I wanted to keep you all abreast as to that activity. There were some really good ideas that they talked about, and I will be bringing that and following it through the legislative committee this session and let you know how it goes.
Thank you, Keek. Anybody else? Kenny?
Not an announcement, but a kudo. I like giving kudos to staff, and during the holiday season, of course, the fire department does their long-standing night with Santa Claus, and this year was just a banner year for them. I got this right. Over 7,500 pounds of food was collected over 7 nights, $3,000+, 3,000 candy canes were handed out. 37 members helped, over 300 hours of volunteer time. So it was a spectacular success. I believe our good mayor spent some time out there. And thanks to IT for, of course, helping Santa Cracker get that going, and the city shop for keeping that old Buffalo fire engine running. So the fire department, well done. And I know that the Shop with the Cop was also a very big success again, so public safety, again, does a great job for those in need during the holidays. That's all,
Thanks,
Mr.
Kenny.
Mayor.
Anybody else? Anything? I have to tell you, I did ride along with Santa Claus, and it took me to a place that I'd never been aware of. I mean, I've never driven through the neighborhoods where people are smiling and waving. It's like you feel like you're in a parade. It was very moving. It was real interesting to see people excited to see Santa, and when you're riding next to him, you feel like you're special. He did all the work, but I just, it was neat. We don't get into neighborhoods down on the street. Kids in their pajamas, all excited, and it was good for my soul. It was good for my energy to kind of relate to how basic our city is. We sit up here and deal with turkeys and bunnies and stuff and fire trucks, but when you get out in the neighborhoods and there's the folks who live there, and it's their world too, and it was good for the soul. And so I'm grateful that they invited me and that I went, because it was a unique opportunity to see our community from a different perspective, you know. So, anyway, moving on. Consent calendar, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Thoughts or comments? Hearing none. Roll call?
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Aye.
Gabriel?
Yes?
Deacon?
Yep.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
All right. Moving to other business. This is Council Bill number 25-1000, repealing Municipal Code 1550-400 and 1550-400C4, which allows the relocation of existing billboards.
Mr. Mayor, before we get going on this, I would like to make a motion to table both council bills until the second meeting in February.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Discussion?
So the reason why I moved to table this is because we currently have an applicant under the existing ordinance. We just scheduled a hearing for them on February 4th, and I believe it would be unfair for the city to change the rules in the middle of the game when they've already made the application, paid the fees, and we've scheduled a hearing. So this is not to comment on either of the municipal code amendments, just to simply say we should work through the process as it exists, and then once that's done, I think it would be fair to the applicant to change it.
Comments? Christie?
Mr. Mayor, I like that approach because I think it also gives us the opportunity to see the process and then make an informed decision after the process.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to hear what legal says about that. I feel like the motions before us are a little convoluted here, so I don't feel like it's necessary to postpone. We don't know whether there's even a need to do that.
Randy?
It's a request.
It will be voted on in terms of the legality, whatever, of changing the code. My understanding was that at least part of one of the proposed bills was to enable them to get in compliance with the current code, because under the current code, the application does not meet the requirements set out by council in terms of distance from a residential area and height. So my understanding was at least one of the proposed ordinances was to help them meet that requirement.
Kiki?
Sorry.
Thanks. Randy, I'm trying to get my head around what you just said, but I think the point would be that if either one of these passed, one would remove the ability to move them, and then the other one would grant them a variance for just about anything, so they wouldn't need to get into compliance or need a hearing. It would, basically, their variance could be, it would grant them the ability to request a variance.
Yes, they would be able to request a variance, and council would have to rule on whatever it is that they requested.
So they wouldn't be granted the time to get into compliance if the second one passed. They would basically have the opportunity to come up with different reasons for a variance request.
That is true. They still would not be in compliance, but they could request a variance.
So on the first, I guess on the first thing that we're saying is it gives them a chance to be heard, but I think we're just prolonging the inevitable of what my original position was on this by tabling it, that there's going to be an ongoing discussion until and that's what my position was trying to avoid, that I don't think that there's a reason to continue something that doesn't look like it's working. So I'm not in favor of tabling.
Dan, English?
I understand. Oh, sorry. English is first?
Okay, yeah, just that, well, one thing, there's not an urgent timeline for anybody on this, I don't think, but I did like the idea of, something in there that would have the opportunity for a variance, but the way I read that, they don't just hand out variances willy-nilly. It's got some pretty tight standards. You've got to make it's got to meet some criteria. So, so I don't think, I would rather go on tonight and at least have the opportunity to, I hope, get to vote on that one with the variance option, but.
Mr. Gookin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my concern here is a potential legal action against the city for changing the rules in the middle of the game. And I would like to hear your comments, Randy, on a legal concept called estoppel against the government. If I said that correctly.
Well, you said it correctly. I don't think that it applies in this case. The question is whether the change in the rule would impair some right that exists in a party's position. In this case, as I read the current code, the application does not meet the current code. So because of the distance from residential area and the height of the billboard. So basically the applicant doesn't have a vested right to move the billboard as they've requested. So changing the ordinance is not going to affect their rights.
I understand what you said, but yet the permit was accepted by the city and a hearing has been scheduled.
And there's nothing in the code that allows staff to reject an application and prevent somebody from coming to a hearing. I've made that opinion to many departments in the city when they've requested me to approve the denial of a permit that by ordinance has to go to council.
And that's exactly my point and why I agree. Why I would like to see this thing postponed is to give them that opportunity. I do have a case law here, Schuster versus the City of New York, which involved a business that had applied for a permit under an old ordinance. The city changed the law. The applicant argued that they had a vested right to operate under the laws in place at the time of the application. The court ruled that the applicants who had already begun the process before the ordinance was amended should be governed by the original law. Again, my motivation here is just to avoid a lawsuit against the city. This is a $12 billion company.
My opinion stands that there is no substantial right that's impaired because of the nature of the application and the current law.
Okay.
Hey, Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Randy, just a quick follow-up. I, too, would like to see us move forward and grant the opportunity for a variance. In my understanding, it would come before council in a public hearing, and council would have the opportunity to say yay or nay. So that's a process I'd like to see happen. But I did have a question. Mr. Schreiber testified, I think it's a matter of interpretation of our ordinance, because he testified that the building blocks some of that view, or it has an impact on the height, and so those are different interpretations of our ordinance. Have you reviewed any of that information that he's provided?
Yes, I have.
And what's your thoughts?
It is a principle of statutory construction that all parts of a statute should be interpreted so as to give effect to them. So my interpretation of the current ordinance is that subsection 4E, which is a general height restriction, is that you have to read section 3I6 in light of that other section. So 3I6 deals with general principles of when a building is blocking a view, or when the view of the building is blocked by a billboard. But 4E is the overriding statute, even despite the the previous statute, you still cannot exceed the height of the existing billboard. It just gives the council a chance to alter the height, subject to the maximum height, based on the existence of buildings.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Kiki?
I just want to clear up some order of business here. If what you're saying, this gets tabled to February 4th, last time, and I was the one who made the motion, and I stand by my motion, that I feel that we've been very business friendly. I feel that the process moving forward to allow the moving of billboards was likely a mistake. It became very problematic during the process. And so I wanted to remove that language and made a motion to do that. On top of my motion and direction was another motion and direction to come up with a variance. Staff brought both of those forward. Where we're at right now with tabling this is we would be telling the client that, or telling the requester of this motion that on February 4th, we're going to approve a variance and give them a hearing. And so what it means is that we don't ever get to hear from the rest of council if any of them may want to say, you know, maybe enough is enough. We did not remove anything regarding digitized billboards. And as Mr. Halliday said, that is the next evolution. That is the next thing that is what Lamar does a great job with. And we've been very business friendly with that. Those digital billboards are a benefit to them and very important. We have a community that's used to seeing billboards where they are right now. And they look to that for the information that they provide through EMS, and they provide for all of these customers who want to be there. They have multiple opportunities to put more customers on these digital billboards than they ever had before at a higher price. So I think that we're being very proactive and very business friendly, but by doing this, there is no way to do what might be the right thing for a number of community members. And that is that they may not want to see more digitized billboards move to other parts of the community.
That's not,
And
I'm
so-
sorry, Mr. Mayor, that's
and
not
so-
Hang on,
discussion.
hang on, let
she's
her
off
finish.
topic.
Way off.
Let her
So
finish.
what I'm saying is, if we're going to say, let's table this, what we're doing is basically saying, prepare your hearing, get in, but they aren't getting in compliance on their current application. They're going to be moving to getting into an argument over a variance, assuming that that's going to be approved. So I think that this is the reason, one of the major reasons I said at our last council meeting, I think this is going to be this way with each one of these billboard move requests. It's problematic,
I'm sorry.
and
we're off
it
topic,
doesn't,
Mr. Mayor.
Way.
and
Hang on,
it
topic.
doesn't, it puts variance language in locations that could be there for multiple decades, 40 years at a time.
Mr. Mayor.
So I'm just thinking that if we table this, we don't have the opportunity to look at both of the proposals that were directed towards staff to bring forward to council. We'll never get to hear.
Thank you, Kiki.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr.
Thank you. Going back to what we're supposed to be discussing, what Randy raises a really good point regarding the what's written down. When we passed this thing, we said it might need a little work. So we may have to go through it once to see what kind of work is needed. And to me, that's due diligence. That's being respectful of the business that's made the application. We go through the process, we see what needs to be fixed. He's pointed out, and Mr. Schreiber, I don't know, maybe one of you guys pointed out, there's a conflict in the code. It says one thing, it says another thing. Mr. Adams has given his interpretation. But this is why we have a hearing, because he's going to offer his interpretation, and the applicant's going to offer their interpretation, and it's up to us to decide. That's our job. And I want to give them the fair shake and give them the opportunity to do that. Look at the way the current code works, and then if we need to throw it out, we throw it out. If we need to change it, we change it. But I'd like to keep the process going. And that's what I believe is the function of a public hearing, which is what they paid for, it's what we've scheduled, and it's what I think we should do.
Christine.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, it seemed like we got way off topic talking about personal feelings towards billboards and not about whether to table a motion for tonight. I guess I'm a little hesitant to table because I'm not certain what our final authority is at the public hearing. For instance, Renata had sent out some information earlier, a few weeks ago, to Lamar, stating that council had no authority to do anything in the public hearing to approve their process. So I'm concerned that if we don't move forward and decide once and for all on a variance, that we'll be faced with council being told we have no authority. I'm not sure if we do, if we have the ultimate authority, or if we're bound by the interpretation of the ordinance. So I guess I'd like an answer to that.
Council does not have the authority to violate its own laws. So if if an ordinance is clear, council can't say, we just aren't going to apply it in this case, absent a section that allows you to grant a variance.
So we
So then you
essentially
amend the
are.
code.
So if there is, and it is my opinion that the proximity part of the ordinance by itself, how far you can be from a residential zone, is clear. And council can't ignore that without other authority.
So essentially, if we move forward tonight and table it, we're setting them up for failure at the February 4th meeting.
They would have their public hearing, but council
we
would
couldn't.
not have the authority to ignore its own ordinance.
All right.
So you don't want to table it then?
Not
and
if there's no way
I
they,
think Kiki had,
That was kind of my point. Sorry.
I believe Councilmember Gookin's motion was to table it to the second meeting in February. So there would, on the first meeting in February, the public hearing would be under the ordinance as it stands today.
and so,
Mr. Mayor, given the new information, I will withdraw my motion to table.
Do I need a second for that?
I'll withdraw my second.
Okay. So we're
Like it
kind of
never
back
happened,
to
okay.
Renata. Would you like to address any of this?
Sure. I was just going to give a quick little staff report here and leave it up to council to have some dialogue. So I'm kind of doing double duty tonight. Joanne should be back on the 13th, and we'll get back to normal operations and municipal services. So I'm just going to give the presentation of both ordinance staff reports as one. So council has requested staff to bring forward 2 alternative ordinances. The first one that is being proposed is to repeal sections of Chapter 1550, 400C3, and 400C4, which would remove the recently added ability for billboards to move from their current location to alternative locations within the community, commercially zoned, and under certain circumstances that you guys are aware of. The code would allow existing billboards to be upgraded to digital versions of the existing sign, identical in height, size, and location, if the repeal were to occur. As you noted, we have a current request in under the existing code, and that would still move forward under the current code, and as you just heard from Randy, would not meet the current code requirements because of the potential height conflict and the location to residential zone. Based on case law and statutory law. If this were to be repealed, then they would not be able to come back in and apply to move their billboards to different locations. So the second ordinance that's being proposed adds a new section to Chapter 1550 400C that would allow the applicant to seek a variance from the restrictions and standards set forth in that code. The proposed language reads that the applicant for relocation of a billboard may request a variance from any of the restrictions or standards in section 1550-400C. The city council will consider the request for a variance in conjunction with the application for relocation. A variance may only be granted upon showing an undue hardship due to site characteristics, and if approval of the variance would not be contrary to public interest or the purpose of this section. So as you look at the purpose of the sign code section there. And you'd have to provide findings accordingly, and as you know, we would prepare findings that would walk you guys through that. So if that ordinance is approved, then staff would see that the variance would occur at the same time as the public hearing for the relocation of the billboard. Council would hear the evidence presented and determine if the applicant has demonstrated that there was an undue hardship due to site characteristics, and the approval of the variance would not be contrary to public interest or purposes of the sign code. Council must make findings in fact to support those findings in law, and the variance could be granted, and the public hearing for the relocation would continue, because then they would have that opportunity to say, we've now met the code requirement, and could have the public hearing continue. And then council would consider the relocation request and make the appropriate findings. So I and other staff are here to stand for questions. I'm gonna go sit back at the desk over here, but am still available, as is our planning director and legal.
Any questions for council, for staff?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Mayor.
Go.
Thank you. So when push comes to shove, at the end of the day, we still make the decision, correct?
You will make several decisions. The
Several.
first would be which code amendment or repeal you'd want to do. And then if the variance option was approved, you'd have a hearing and see evidence and then make the final determination if the variance was acceptable or not.
So
And
forgive me, I should
Randy-
have stated that better, Renata.
okay.
If the variance passes, still, council still makes the final decision, and then we get to figure out the fun part of what would be a hardship.
Yes, that is my understanding. Randy, if you'd like to weigh in
Or
with
the
more
findings,
legality
okay.
on that.
The standard for granting a variance is up to council, other than in zoning, which is governed by state law. I drafted this variance language using the language that is throughout the city's code. There are 9 sections that deal with variances in the city code. 7 of those use that standard of showing an undue hardship due to unique site characteristics. There are 2 statutes that deal with stormwater, deal with federal law, which don't use that standard. But the standard is ultimately also up to council to decide what standard they want to grant for variances in this area of the law.
Mr. Mayor? To follow up on that, but it also says, or proving it isn't contrary to the public interest. And that's part of the variance standard as well, correct?
No, it's not or, it's and.
Okay,
Both things.
so both of them have to be in place?
Correct, and that's what we see in our zoning code, that's what we see in the Complete Streets Code, the Stormwater Management Code, the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer, the Shoreline Ordinance, all use that language.
And, okay, good, thank you.
Any thoughts here? I have a question for you. If we go the variance route, does it mean that it's the same variance each time something like this would come forward?
No, it would be up to the applicant to convince council that there is an undue hardship and that the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, as written.
Any thoughts? Motion?
Mr. I'd make a motion to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 25-1000 once by title only.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, so this is a motion, this is not to pass, this is not to pass the bill, this is simply to direct the clerk to read the title. Otherwise, the clerk would be required to read the entire ordinance.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, hearing none, would you read the title, please?
I think we need to do a roll call real fast.
Clearly.
Okay. Miller,
Aye.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yep.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Thank you. Read the title, please.
Council Bill 25-1000, an ordinance providing for the amendment of section, oh, sorry, just a
That's not the
second.
right one.
Okay, Council Bill 25-1000, an ordinance providing for the repeal of sections 15.50.400 C3 and 15.50.400 C4, providing for the repeal of other conflicting sections, providing for severability, providing for the publication of a summary of the ordinance, and providing for an effective date thereof.
All right. Any other questions?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a comment, and I lost my place.
It's okay.
Found my place. So I will be opposing this. The reason is, right now, if you're paying attention, the country is in a deregulatory mood. From the national level, even our own governor talks about how Idaho is becoming less and less regulated. And I believe with this ordinance, we've added a whole bunch of regulations. I mean, way over the top. The fact that it could not be processed and that are understood and that there were so many stumbling blocks in the way kind of demonstrates that. So anything to make it easier for business, I'm in favor of that. In fact, I do think that repealing it is anti-business. And I know Ms. Miller has said that she doesn't think that it's anti-business. But I think it's not for us to judge. It is for Mr. Schreiber and Mr. Halliday to judge, because it's their business. And they're the ones who I think are asking us to be accommodating to a business. And I would like to think the city of Coeur d'Alene is pro-business. So again, if we want to answer the question of whether we're being pro-business or anti-business, let's talk to them. I don't care what we say up here. It is rare and expensive to move a billboard. There's only 12 of them in the city. And it's not going to happen all the time because it's rare and expensive. Further, we get a public hearing, which means if you don't want to move billboards, and there's that sentiment, I understand that. I talked to some people, and they don't like billboards. So if you don't want to move a billboard, you're given a chance to come out and say so at a public hearing, and we get to decide. So we're not really saying, yeah, go ahead and move them, go wild. There's a process in place, and I was not good with that when we did it originally. I'm okay with it now. I would like to see us do it right, and I would encourage council to vote no on this. Let's go with a variance. Let's have the hearing. Let's hear what they have to say. Let's show the people that we are pro-business. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we haven't actually made the motion to adopt yet, so that was the dispense with the rules discussion. Is that, am I in the right place? I just
You're
want to make
good.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't miss something.
Okay. Christie?
No, I'll wait for Kiki to make the motion.
Okay.
Okay, well then I'll make the motion
Sorry
to
about
adopt
that.
Council Bill 25-1000.
Second.
So that does
Discussion.
not have the variance language?
Christie?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I listened to some of the lead up from Councilmember Miller to this, and it seems to be a lot bigger issue than just moving a billboard. What I would say is that these local companies have started this process over a year ago, have been very cooperative, have asked the city to work with them, just like any other business has. And they haven't even got the opportunity to go through a process before there's now a proposal, just end the process completely. We don't even want to see you. That is not business friendly, as you said, and it's not fair. Why would you give industry the opportunity to come forward to council and go through a process and then all of a sudden say, no, we've decided midstream, we just don't like you at all, so we're just not going to even hear from you. And that's what we would be doing if we passed this original motion by Councilmember Miller. It's not a sense of fairness, it's not business friendly, and I don't support it. We have an opportunity in a public hearing to say everything we want to say about billboards, but this is really just a matter of, do we give them the ability to have a public hearing? And I think that's what we need to do.
Mr. Mayor.
Amy?
I'll add, it's not whether we, for me personally, I can only speak for myself, like Lamar, not like Lamar, that's not it. We need to get this right. We don't have it right yet. My understanding is Lamar would have the opportunity to move forward if they met the requirements of the ordinance that we created. Unfortunately, those requirements were not met. So we're in a conundrum here on what to do to move forward. So I do support repealing this and doing more work on this. It's important. It impacts the landscape of our community. And I think our community deserves us to do more work on it and get it right.
Mr. Mayor?
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I would just follow up on that we did have this discussion last year, and the community had the opportunity to be present, be part of the conversation, and we made a decision to allow the industry to relocate their old boards. They don't get to build new ones, they don't get to have two. They can relocate an old board and move it to an area town that's more of a business district because the demographics have changed. We went through all that discussion, and the council voted, the majority voted yes. So I'm not sure why we're being told we need to get it right, because we did it already.
Mr. Mayor,
Kiki?
Obviously, this isn't a popular conversation with a few council members, and I respect your opinions, and I respect your position on this. I am not making this a bigger issue for any other reason. I'm a Coeur d'Alene Viking. Thank you for the championship. I had some consternation when we changed from static billboards to digital billboards because a lot of people didn't want that. But I approved it because I believe businesses need a chance to grow. I believed that that was keeping up with technology, and I think we are business friendly. I believe that people deserve the right to be more educated, and we made some mistakes with approving the ability to move these billboards. We've spent a huge amount of tax dollars in staff time to go through this, and it promises to be that way for a lot of them, and that's my opinion. I want Lamar to be successful. I think they're good for the community. I appreciate all the things they've done, but I stand by my position that we are not doing a disservice by removing the ability to move. I think that they will thrive. They're a talented company. I think the community will thrive. And I don't think that we will put the city through ongoing, repeated variance decision language that really is not a disservice to the city, to the community, or to anyone in the industry. So I'm just going to stand by my position, and it's not personal, and it's not directed towards any one particular company. It's just what I feel is best for the community, the city, and all of us as a whole.
Mr. Mayor, follow-up?
Sure.
Thank you. The comment was made that we've spent I think it was a large or tremendous amount of tax dollars in staff time. That's just anecdotal, I guess. It is their job, but it was their direction that created the ordinance, and council signed off on it. That was their direction, not council's direction, and we approved it. So, and I just think saying that we've spent a ton of taxpayer money is actually not a very fair or responsible statement. There's no dollar sign attached to that. It's just a statement.
Okay. Dan?
Well, just, I would say, I think, we're having a good, thoughtful, responsible process on this. weighing things. I like the options to be able to, again, why I will, not support that first motion, but would support a variance where we can take a look at specific situations and see if that meets the test, and, and maybe we'll decide in that case it does or it doesn't. Actually, I just, from personal experience back some years ago when I started Anchor House, a boys' home on Government Way, and I had to get a special use permit to put a group home facility there. And we had to pave a driveway going in, which was fine, but they wanted it had to be so wide. And the site characteristics that I said, no, we can't do that, and they approved it, is there were two big trees. I don't know if they're still there on either side of that, but they gave us a variance, and I think the community benefited. I think, so I think it's good to have the opportunity to make some judgment calls, and that's, again, that's what we're here for, and we make the hard calls, and then we live with, our vote, so.
Kenny?
So not to talk about what everybody else already did, but I've heard the words business-friendly more today than I ever have. And I struggle with the thought that we're not business-friendly because of one incident. But my hope of hopes is that the council has the ability that if something does happen, we can fix it the correct way. I don't look forward to every time there's a variance comes up that we go through this every time. Because it's not pleasant, but as Councilman Gukin has told me 100 times, it is our job. So I agree with that, and I think I'm leaning much more towards the thought of giving us that final word and having the ability for them to state their case.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's been fun. So let's get down to business here. We need a roll call.
Miller,
Yes?
Gabriel,
No.
Kukin,
No.
English,
No.
Wood,
No.
Evans,
Yes.
All right, so are we moving on now?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill number 25-1001 once by title only.
Discussion?
Second?
Thank you.
And again, Mr. Mayor, this is simply to prevent Renata from sitting here for 20 minutes reading an ordinance.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Kukin,
Yeah.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller.
Aye.
All right, moving on.
That was loud.
Could you read the title, please?
Council Bill number 25-1001, an ordinance providing for the amendment of section 15.50.400C to allow for a request for a variance from any of the restrictions and standards of this section, providing for the repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, providing for the publication of a summary of the ordinance, and providing for an effective date thereof.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to adopt Council Bill 25-1001.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would just say that I really appreciate that we have the ability to have these discussions and bring out different viewpoints and work through some things as a unified body here, whether we agree or not. And that I still stand by my position, although we see where that's going to go. And I know that down the road, when this comes back around, I'll be interested to see what the community's response is. And so that's good. And we like to give the people what they want.
Anyone else? Hearing none, look for a roll call, please.
Gabriel,
Yes.
Kukin,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
No.
Miller.
No.
All right. Thank you all. Look for adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, after making that sausage, I would move that there be no other business, that the meeting be adjourned.
Second?
Moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all. Happy New Year.